Could you see my screen?
Yep, looks great.
Perfect, perfect. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking some time with us today to talk about technology. Probably all excited to hear about this on your lunch break. And I'm going to apologize at first. You might hear my dog barking in the background. So I just want to set that straight. But thanks for taking the time today, this afternoon. We're going to talk about really some characteristics or qualities on how to build and create that solid technology foundation, not just with your infrastructure and your IT or your tools, but also with your people and processes around that. So what I wanted to do here is just kind of set the stage. Ideally, I would love to be able to interact with all you folks, but there's a Q&A session once we end the PowerPoint that Kathleen will open up. So we'll address any and all questions at the end. So feel free to write them down and get them ready for the end of the PowerPoint presentation. My name is Michael Ubaldini. I'm the Director of Business Development and Sales at Strategic Technology Solutions. Well, you'll hear me refer to us as STS for short. I've been working with the legal community for upwards of 20 years now, delivering IT services, technology solutions, hardware and software, and consulting as well. Been working with MSPs, managed service providers, for pretty much that length of time, 15, 16 years. So I would not necessarily call myself an expert, but doing something for 20 years, you get a little bit of experience on technology and law firm and the culture. Who is STS? I believe there's probably some folks on here that attended some of our prior webinars. We are a managed IT service provider. We strictly focus on the legal community. So 95% of our clients are law firms. We've been around for as well 20 years. And we are actually the MSP for the Beverly Hills Bar Association. A couple components here that we're really proud of. One, we've been recognized by Channel Futures for the last 4 years as one of their top 501 MSPs. And the bullet point in the middle, which we're really, really proud of, and I want to highlight it a little bit because we're going to talk deeper into it, that kind of creates this foundation of building a solid IT environment and team, is we're proud to be one of the only MSPs out there being cybersecurity certified. So if there's any takeaway that you folks have from this session today, is really going back to your teams, whether it's an internal staff that you use for technology or an external outsourced managed service provider, really kind of get a question out to them and really provide yourself an understanding of what is our cybersecurity maturity level? Are we protected? Do we have the right tools, people, and processes in place to really ensure that our data and our clients' data is protected? So something really important probably to write down and take away from that. So hopefully I don't lose anybody since I just gave that nugget away so early on in the presentation. So let's talk about who manages your technology. And there's again, if we were face to face, I would ask this to the audience, and I'm sure we'd get pretty much everything you could possibly imagine as far as what type of team and people you have in place managing your technology. So we've touched on a couple of them here, but essentially, being around this industry for 20 years, I've been able to see in the one end of the spectrum. A firm starts out, they start building their practice, so they need technology in which to leverage to run their business. So they could go out and maybe they contract with a friend or a partner, or maybe it's a cousin or a niece or nephew to help them get the firm started from a technology perspective. And they leverage that person not only to build their infrastructure and get their technology set up, but maybe on an ongoing basis to help support it moving forward. We call that a type of break fix type of relationship, and we'll touch on the differences between break fix, managed IT services, and of course staff. But you could have a company working for you in that type of model where they help you get started, and then they're ongoing, whether it's a retainer or someone you could call to come in and fix things as problems occur. You could also hire that person. We've seen it where firms have an IT person on staff, sometimes a team on staff, but we've also seen it where you have that firm administrator or that person that knows the most about technology kind of inherits the technology management perspective, or it has to wear that technology hat. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is that you're completely outsourcing it to an IT service provider or a managed service provider, or you have a team of IT professionals on staff. You have a technology department that's managing and supporting and ensuring the health and well-being of your infrastructure. And there's everything in between, right? Being an MSP, we work with firms that are on the small end of the spectrum where they're outsourcing certain components to us to manage for them, but they still have some semblance of IT staff, whether that's a first line of support or a first line of defense, if you will. Initial surfaces, a user picks up the phone or goes and grabs hold of the help desk support persons to fix the problem. And if it gets outside of the skill set of that person, they escalate it to the MSP. On the other side of the spectrum, we have firms that they have a full staff, but there's certain components that come up, whether there's a project that the firm's IT team doesn't have the skill set or they don't have enough people, so they outsource it to an MSP or some other type of IT professional to come on and help them. So you could get you could get a plethora of combinations depending on what the firm's needs are, what the firm's maturity level is when it comes to technology, complexity, and of course size. And we'll get into some of those components here shortly. I touched on that break fix and the managed IT from an outsourcing perspective. So these are two types of outsourced type of IT services that the vertical has and the community has. And I wanted to kind of differentiate the two a little bit. Break fix. Ironically, most managed service providers, most IT service providers started as a type of break fix organization. What we called them back 15, 20 years ago, which you may have heard this term, is an IT integrator for the legal community or for law firms. So those types of organizations were those ones that a firm would hire a break fixed outsourced IT provider to come in, and what we would call it would be rip and replace. So every 3 to 5 years, an integrator would come in and upgrade the firm's infrastructure, the hardware, the software, be able to integrate it and kind of get them on a refreshed technology foundation, if you will, and then typically go away. And then if there's problems that arise with that environment down the road, they would call that organization back in to fix it. And then that whole cycle of rip and replace continues. That type of organization or those types of relationships are kind of going by the wayside. You see more and more outsourced IT service organizations and more managed IT service organizations that are break fix type of operations. They're typically being acquired by other MSPs or just going out of business because they're not in a position because of the amount of resources they have and just the way they've designed their business to accommodate for strategic growth. They're very, very reactive, and they're not very, very strategic when it comes to, they're great with being able to lay the foundation and building a good IT infrastructure for today. But as it relates to the technology roadmap down the road and what the firm wants to be and who the firm wants to be in the future, there's some gaps that don't enable them to continue to stay in business. Firms typically outgrow them. So these are some of those areas as far as those gaps. So there's that lack of relationship, that strategic and leadership type of relationship. They're consistently in a process of what we typically say is putting out fires. They're great as far as being able to ensure they're supporting the infrastructure as it is, but they don't necessarily get the time and the bandwidth to focus on that strategic approach, the strategic direction, and the growth for the firm as far as what they want to be down the road. With an MSP, a managed IT service provider, as well as when we get into firms that have a large IT staff, they are built for more of that strategic approach and that proactive approach to helping not only put together an IT environment and infrastructure for today's needs, but also have the ability to focus on the strategic growth and direction and be able to roadmap where the firm wants to be down the road and how are they going to invest and leverage technology in which to do so and sustain that growth. So how do we determine when the right time is to or how we should either invest in people to bring them on staff, or should we be outsourcing it? And these are some of the components that kind of drive that. Being in this industry and working with law firms as long as I have been, what I believe is the most critical determining factor, or what I've seen as really the biggest drivers, is really the culture of the firm. All these have components to it that help drive whether we outsource, whether the firm outsource, or whether we hire staff. But one is culture. And it's funny because we'll talk about this a little bit later too, as it relates to support and understanding that law firm culture. But there's that perception that firms need and must have a resource on staff. Now, things have changed, obviously. Circumstances over the course of the last 2.5 years have dictated really what we're doing as our businesses, what we're doing with our businesses, as far as, coming into the office, hybrid, remote workers, and all that stuff that is associated with COVID. But what we've typically seen is that culture drives it, and the firms have the perception, and they feel more comfortable when they have an issue, a problem with their computer. They could go over to Sally's desk or John's office and grab them by the lapels and say, "Hey, fix this." That's still there. That's still apparent. The other components, and they kind of go hand in hand, is the number of people with your firm. What is your employee base? Usually we see the smaller firms, firms anywhere from 20, even 15 and under. They've outsourced it to a break fix type of organization. That's what we've seen typically. And then the firms between, we'll say 30 and 70, those are the firms that traditionally gravitate towards outsourcing or hiring a managed service provider or an IT service provider. The reason behind that is they are at a level of complexity, meaning they might have multiple offices, a lot of remote workers, different levels of applications, legal specific applications, in addition to your practice management applications and your Microsoft stack applications. And there's some level of experience or expertise the firm might need from a support perspective with those applications. Once you drive higher and start getting into the firms that have hundreds of users, those are firms that traditionally have a full-time IT staff, multiple staff members with different levels of expertise. Those smaller firms, some have IT staff, but sometimes there's those gaps, because to go out there and put the right type of team in place to really establish a great technology foundation for a firm, there's a lot of areas and skill sets that you have to bring on, and it could get expensive as far as the investment. You need or should be looking at a security expert, an applications expert right around Microsoft, but also those legal specific application expertise, document management, practice management, accounting. You have infrastructure, you have networking, you have hardware. So there's all these different skill sets that could be very, very difficult for a firm that has 20, 30, 50, 60 users to invest in. So they traditionally try to outsource it. You're still getting a full team, a full level of expertise, but could potentially be at a fraction of the cost, and maybe a fraction of frustration too, managing more people. Although we've seen a lot of firms that have brought in MSPs and then shifted to getting rid of ending that relationship and then hiring full-time IT staffs, and we've seen vice versa. So those are some of the components of some of the reasons why firms either hire full-time staff or they outsource it. Employee count, expertise, level of expertise as far as technology and the application set you're using, complexity of the firm. If you have multiple offices regionally or even nationally, do you want to have an MSP handling that, or do you want to have resources in each office to have that local support to be able to provide that white glove type of relationship and support? We've seen a mix and mash of everything. But in my personal opinion, what I've really seen as the biggest driver, whether it's outsourced versus bring us staff internally, it's really the culture of the firm. So what defines great law firm technology? And I maybe you guys may have hit it or heard it, but there's three components really. It's people, it's processes, and it's technology slash tools. And these are 8 of the buckets or 8 of the boxes here that traditionally have been the underlying qualities of great law firm technologies. Some of them have been consistent over the years, and some of them have become more apparent over the course of the last 3 to 5 years. The consistent ones, and you probably can all guess them. I mean, security has always been important. Obviously, it's critical now. It's you walk into a firm. When we walk into a firm, usually the biggest issue that they're facing or the biggest concern they have is around security, protecting their environment, protecting their data, protecting their client data. That hasn't changed. It's just escalated, and we'll circle back to that in a minute. But reliability, being able to know and have confidence that your system, your environment, your IT infrastructure is going to be working and performing. Again, going back to that culture of a law firm, if you're not able to work, if your system is down, you can't bill time, and that's the bread and butter of your business. So going to the next one with respect to cost, being able to really thoroughly understand what you are spending on your IT budget on an annual basis has been important. And it's interesting considering the time frame that we're in, September, October, budgeting season for 2023. I was going to say you'd be surprised, but maybe you wouldn't be surprised. We go into firms that there's many firms out there that don't necessarily budget for technology. What traditionally or typically can happen is that an initiative comes up, a need arises from a technology perspective. So the stakeholders build a business case and present it to the management and the decision makers to say, hey, listen, this is the business case, this is the IT initiative we have, this is how much it's going to cost. It's either approved or not approved. That's traditionally the way we've seen it over time. It's in other instances where firms might not necessarily know what they're spent. They know they have a technology budget, but they don't necessarily what that's being spent on or how it's being spent and how much is being spent on their technology budget. We were just working with a firm that we help them analyze what their technology budget and spend is, and what we realized, or what we helped them realize, that they were actually spending twice as more as what they thought they were spending. So being able to wrap your arms around what you are truly spending your IT dollars on, and being able to predictably understand it on an ongoing basis it sets your mind at ease that we know that we're going to be spending X amount of dollars each month, each year on technology, plus or minus 10, 15%, depending on what type of environment and team you have in place. Also, what's been consistent is, and I think these two kind of go hand in hand, is your support, that best-in-class service, and your industry expertise. I believe that in order to deliver best-in-class service and support, you must have, in order to define that great law firm technology, you must have industry expertise. And we're talking about really 3 pillars when it comes to industry expertise. And this is that culture conversation. One is, obviously, you want to either bring in an IT team or outsource your IT to an organization and people that have technology experience, right? But you also want them to have that that law firm, legal technology expertise, being able to understand and how to support law firm technology, the applications, document management, practice management, accounting, but also how to be able to configure it. A lot of these systems traditionally and typically talk to each other. You have your Microsoft applications talking to your document management applications, talking to your accounting and practice management applications. So there's a level of complexity, a level of integration, and a level of configuration that goes into it. So being able to have a team that understands that is key. I think what the most critical component is really having a team and a support staff that understands and gets the culture of a law firm. And that goes back to that reliability and performance. If there's a user that has a deadline to meet and they're not able to work, and they're going to pick up that phone and call that support desk, and if that person on the other line doesn't understand the business of law and understand the culture of a law firm, that is not going to be a really good foundation for law firm technology and a relationship that's probably going to sour over time. So being able to have those three critical components as far as industry expertise, I think are very, very important. The two or three or four that have really escalated, if you will, to the top of the priority list, we touched on security. That's most important, and really being able to understand at a foundational level what your risk is from a cybersecurity perspective. That's where it all starts. Right now in today's day and age, it's not a matter of if you folks are going to be compromised, it's a matter of when. The legal community is increasing on a day-to-day basis. They are increasing as a hot target for those threat actors out there. They want access to your data. They want access to your client data because it's sensitive information, and it's important information that they could go out and sell on the dark web, or they could keep you at hostage. As far as keeping your data at hostage, so you pay that ransom. So security is number one, is the most important foundational aspect of building that great law firm technology. The other two really kind of go hand in hand with strategic focus and a proactive approach. And we touched on a little bit about those between a break fix and an MSP and a full-time IT staff, is being able to handle the day-to-day operations and the day-to-day support problems that come up from a technology perspective is obviously critical, but being able to separate the day-to-day operations and that operating type of transactional type of support to the ongoing future support of what does our firm look like today and what do we want our firm to be tomorrow? Do we have the people, processes, tools, and technology in place to get us there? And if not, what do we need to be discussing and talking about in order to take the foundation for our needs today and scale it for the needs of the firm tomorrow? That's where that transparency talk comes in. That's where accountability, being able to sit across the table, all the stakeholders involved from a technology perspective and a business perspective, and really getting an understanding of where the gaps are today and how do we fill them for tomorrow. It starts with security, but it also has those conversations around strategic focus and a proactive approach for the future. This kind of is summarizing some of the things we've already talked about as far as the value that firms would get or can get from having that great law firm technology environment and team in place. You are able to really have that strong foundation that we keep touching on because it's incredibly important for what we need today as far as satisfying our needs and our support today, but being able to also understand what does that look like in the future. Are those conversations happening within your firm? Probably the smaller firms that they may be happening, but that might be happening with one person. That managing partner might be the managing partner, might be the accountant, might be the technology expert and all that. So those conversations could be happening, but most times what we see is they're not happening because it's just limited time and limited resources. Putting out those fires versus having those conversations about what can we be doing today to fill the gaps and what could we be doing tomorrow to sustain our success and even grow. Having that industry knowledge, as I mentioned, being able to not only understand technology, but law firm technology and understanding the culture of law firms are critically important. The strategic planning, the strategic approach, proven and tested technologies. We really didn't touch too much on that, but are you running applications that are unsupported? Are you running on equipment that might be end of warranty or end of life? Just let's be honest here. Law firms have traditionally not been early adopters of technology, and we're not talking about cutting edge and leading edge technology as far as versions of software and hardware go. but have those critical pieces in place running on updated technology and updated infrastructure is another benefit and a key of having great law firm technology. Compliance and security we touched on, but when it all comes down to it, we want to be able to put ourselves, the law firms, put yourselves into a position where you could focus on your core business. You don't have to worry at night thinking about, when I get into the office tomorrow, what are my IT frustrations? Is my IT going to be working? Is it going to be supported? Are we exposed? Are we at risk? These are some of the things that from a foundational perspective and putting the right team, people, processes, and technology in place, being able to eliminate or at least mitigate as many of those frustrations as possible is one of the key benefits of great law firm technology. I said I would circle back to this, and this is, we'll spend a little bit of time on this because it goes back to that cybersecurity certification. And I call it interesting. It might be scary when you hear this, but for most of the audience out there that are attorneys, in order to practice law, you have to have a license, right? Businesses have to have a license to go into business. What's interesting and maybe a little concerning is that as IT professionals, as MSPs, we don't have to have any level of certification to provide IT services to any industry. We believe that's going to be changing, and we see some writing on the wall that's changing, potentially changing that. And we believe probably even further down the road, all organizations, your firm included, all businesses are going to have a certain level of certification when it comes to cybersecurity in order to do business. You folks might be seeing it now with your clients, maybe sending you assessments or audits to kind of help them understand what your security posture is, what your security maturity level is. Your if you have cybersecurity insurance, you're having to go through audits from them on an ongoing basis. So you could see that industry is definitely changing. But it's really wild to think, and kind of scary, like I said, to think that as an IT professional or as an IT service provider, we don't have any organization or any association that dictates the standards that we have to live up to in order to provide IT services. And what's wild about it is you as a law firm essentially hand your keys to the kingdom. All your passwords, all your authentication, and all your credentials to an IT team, again, externally or internally, and you're putting your faith and your belief that they're going to do what's in their best interest, what's in your best interest to keep you protected, to keep you safe, and keep your sensitive information out of the hands of the bad people out there. But again, one of the questions I would ask you and encourage you to go ask your teams is, what are they doing? What are they doing to ensure the health of their environment, of their infrastructure, of their technology situation? Are they going through levels of certification in order to make sure that they're protected, so then they therefore can deliver the protection and needs you need in order to protect your sensitive information? So again, harping on that because we believe it's really the critical foundation of a safe, protected, secure technology environment for a law firm. And you could probably hear my dog barking in the background, maybe. So how do we do that? What are the steps, or what could we be doing in order to ensure that we are at least looking at the right things? Two things we definitely recommend you do at least on an annual basis, and have your teams do it. There's so many organizations out there that can help you do this, is go through what we call an information technology maturity level assessment and a security maturity level assessment on an annual basis. This slide is very, very busy, and at some point in time, maybe you could jump in on some of the other, or if you haven't already, jumped in on some of the other webinars we've done to discuss the cybersecurity maturity platform. But being able to go through these two types of assessments or audits of your IT environment really gives you great tangible evidence of what we look like today. from an IT perspective. What does our environment look like today? Our infrastructure, our technology, our tools, but what does our processes look like? What about our people? You know, there's that social aspect of security when it comes to the firm. If you have an IT manager or IT support person that you have to let go at some point in time, this is a person that could potentially have had access to all your critical information. What is the offboarding process of that? And what happens once that person is gone? Are you resetting all your passwords? Are you re-evaluating all your policies and procedures? So these are all steps that a security maturity assessment and IT maturity assessment look at to see where are our gaps as a firm. Where are we exposed? And what are the recommendations we would need to make to mitigate a lot of those security risks? Now, in some cases, you might not necessarily need to do much, but in other cases, you might need to do a lot. And you don't need to necessarily go through all these processes to become certified. Just being able to understand, though, where you sit from an exposure perspective is incredibly valuable, not only for the health and well-being of today, your business today, but your business moving forward. So again, harping on that security maturity level and IT maturity level assessment, things we definitely believe are musts on an annual basis. So pulling this all together and kind of tying a knot on this, and then we could open it up for some Q&A, but being able to get the right IT environment in place, people, processes, and technology tools, really harping on and really focusing on these critical areas. Again, that solid foundation, building upon cybersecurity, taking that assessment on an annual basis, really understanding where you are at the beginning of each year, knowing where you want the firm to be at the end of the year, knowing that, having that tangible evidence gives you that solid base of which to build on. Ensuring that your teams, whether it's outsourced or whether it's internal staff, have technology experience, law firm technology expertise, and that cultural knowledge to be able to effectively support the users. Understanding, again, that strategic and proactive approach, you're gonna have that reactive, those reactive issues and challenges happening on a day-to-day basis. That's just part of the technology world. It's consistently changing and consistently evolving. But how are we positioning ourselves to predict things before they happen? Do we have a team? Do we have the resources? Do we have the tools in place to be able to predict what is going to happen down the road? And that is a key aspect of a great IT environment and a great IT team. Are your technologies up to par? Are you running supported and up-to-date applications? Are they all in compliance from a licensing perspective? And what about your hardware? Is your hardware up to date? Is it under warranty? Or is it end of life and you need to refresh it? Hitting on all these topics will really put yourself in a place to, one, understand where you sit, but also give you a peace of mind, if you will, and the ability to know that the frustrations from an IT perspective will be limited, but more importantly, that your environment is protected, safe, and not exposed to those threat actors out there. So Kathleen, that's all I have. Hopefully it wasn't too painful. We'll let you get some time back. So if you have questions out there, please hit up the Q&A, and I'm looking at some of them right now. How many law firms have a full-time chief information security officer in your experience? Well, I would probably say not that many. The firms, again, it goes to the size of the firm. Firms that are larger, and those firms that that have a CISO, a chief information security officer, those are firms that are typically, and this is just a guess, firms that have 500 plus users, because that role is justified and it's definitely warranted. But the firms that we target, the firms that we do most of our business with, between 20 and say 150, not many of them at all have chief information security officer. They may have someone with some security experience and expertise, but not that type of level and ability. What size law firm and knowledge of IT and security is the STS client sweet spot? Great question. Touched on a little bit the sweet. We do work typically between 20 and 150. We have firms that are smaller and firms that are larger. The sweet spot, and I touched on it earlier, from an MSP perspective, ours is between probably 30 and 70 users. Typically, we don't work off of retainers. That's going back to that break fix type of relationship. We try to avoid that just because that's not the right approach, and it's not going to provide a firm and the relationship with that strategic type of partnership and that proactive methodology. Assessment first, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. We do work with firms where we won't necessarily do an assessment first, but in those situations, there's a lot of discovery that happens prior to engaging with that client or prior to onboarding that client. But whomever it is that you are considering doing business with, again, no matter whether it's outsourcing to an IT provider, or if you're looking to maybe switch from an IT provider to IT staff or bringing in IT staff, highly recommend going through the IT and security maturity level assessments first, because no matter what type of team you're going to engage with, you're going to be able to provide them with some solid evidence and data as far as what your environment looks like today, and then they could build off of that foundation. Term of engagement, from a services perspective, typically 12 to 36 months is the term of engagement. Any other questions out there? Yes, there is another one. That's funny. I appreciate the feedback. Ooh, that's a great question. Of the presentation slides, which one should I refer to when I try to upsell the STS operations? I'll tell you that the most important one is that one around the cybersecurity maturity level assessment, the IT maturity level assessment slide, and the STS maturity the security maturity level assessment slide. Those are the two most critical ones. I mean, obviously there's the who is STSs out there, but in any conversations you're having around technology, it really should be starting with what is our IT maturity level and what is the cybersecurity maturity level. Those are critical. And I think that's where the conversation has the ability to open up and going deeper to really educate. And that's what this really is when it comes to cybersecurity. And we'll go off on a little bit of a tangent. We still got some time, so bear with me. There's the dog. The dog wants to go. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the conversation was around cloud computing, and there was this perception of cloud computing, and it was unknown and uncertain, and there was a lot of fear with regards to putting our infrastructure or our technology in the cloud. We've come a long way. Most firms out there, I would say probably 90% of the firms out there in some way, shape, or form are using some semblance of cloud technology. That same uncertainty, that same fear, that same unknown is with cybersecurity now. With cloud, it just took years and years of education. Now it's the same process, educating our industry, educating law firms, educating our legal community on really what cybersecurity is all about and the true threats out there. That's critical. So going back to your question, what's the most important topics to discuss and the important slides to show people is really around that cybersecurity aspect, because the more we get educated and the more we understand and the more we know not only about the threats that are out there, but really where are we exposed? How are we exposed? Once we get our arms around that and we have the tools, people, and processes in place to fix it and protect ourselves, I mean, that's gonna keep us ahead of the curve. There's a lot of nasty, mean people out there trying to get their hands on all that sensitive data and put ourselves at risk. We need to be doing a better job of educating our community about it and protecting ourselves. Long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that helped. Other questions? I think that might be it, Kathleen. So again, I want to thank you folks for all your time. Thanks for paying attention. Hopefully you got a couple nuggets to take away and talk to your teams about. And if there's any questions, my contact information is in the information Kathleen shared. So please feel free to reach out. Look forward to hearing from you later. Thank you.